For coming to this. In case you didn't know, we were here to have a conversation with filmmaker Tyler Taormina, who I'll give a little introduction to. He is the co-founder of the Omnis Films Collective, which together has collaborated on 7 films so far, including his 3 features, Ham on Rye, Happer's Comet, and most recently Christmas Eve in Miller's Point, which premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in the Director's Fortnight. With Omnis, he has also produced films including Jonathan Davies' Topology of Sirens, Lorena Alvarado's Los Capítulos Perdidos, and Alexander Simpson's No Sleep Till, which will have its LA premiere next month at the Los Angeles Festival of Movies. And also Carson Lund's Ephus, which releases in theaters tomorrow. So with open arms, please welcome. Please welcome Tyler Taormina.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. So, you said that you wanted to start with Ham on Rye, and maybe if you could give a little introduction to that film, which was your debut, made in 2019, and we have a clip from it playing, but to contextualize that.
Okay. Yeah. So is everyone here a filmmaker, a film director? Is this the audience? So I went to film school. I graduated in 2013 in Boston at Emerson College, and I actually didn't have any ambitions to become a filmmaker. I wanted to write children's television. I grew up with like these really cool Nickelodeon shows, like I don't know if you would know, like The Adventures of Pete and Pete, which actually had the crew of like Hal Hartley films, so it all kind of came together at some point. I don't know. I didn't know anyone who was making films seriously. I didn't know anyone who was making who had made a feature film. And I was making kids shows when there'll be some themes here, and one of them is Hollywood just fucking you over. That's a big theme. And the first time it had happened to me was when I was pitching my kids show, which was called Suburban Legends. It's something I'm actually still really proud of, a project I love. And I actually got pretty far along pretty quickly after college. And I was pitching the show with like this Nickelodeon subsidiary, and we were going to all these big things. I remember Amazon was like the biggest one. It was a pretty decent pitch and everything. And what ended up happening after that point was like a 6-month contract, like standstill basically, where I think my life sort of like fell apart. I just didn't have anything to work on. And that's where I fell in love with cinema. And I made this film, Ham on Rye, with my friends who I studied with. We didn't have any ideas of how to actually make a film. We just had each other, and that'll be another theme as well. So we can watch this, and I'll tell more about it. Okay.
this doo-wop song, the juxtaposition of the doo-wop song playing against the faces of all these kids who are very like terrified to participate in this ritual that they feel like they have to. But that juxtaposition isn't ironic, I don't feel like. I mean, I think it shows that you can still feel nostalgia about that period even when it is really terrifying to go through.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think irony is a sort of an elitist thing, and I feel like obviously we all should be very critical of the world we live in, but you need to remain in love with it too, and I think that compassion is always truly a driving force in making these films. It's the only thing I know I can hold on to going into a shoot and into a script and into an edit, that it's like, I will do my best work if I have love for the people in this thing.
Do you think that irony is something that's like too pervasive in film
cheap.
now?
It's cheap. It's easy. It's a way in which you can put yourself aside from the conversation and look down on it. There's no vulnerability in irony, and vulnerability to me is one of the biggest strengths and the hardest things. But it's funny. I haven't watched this clip in 6 years, and I realized watching like out of context, like what the fuck. So sorry if y'all don't know what the context is for that. It's also so funny to me to watch that and think how much has transpired for the lives of so many of my friends making films from this weird sort of small thing. But that's sort of what I want to talk about here today, is how there's a lot of brutal realities about like graduating film school and going out and doing it. You're going to all be faced in front of so many crossroads that are just truly hard to know what the right one is. And I think the biggest one, and the first one, is going to be, do I wait until someone gives me money to do it the real way, to make a film the legit way, or do I just make a film for no money? And that was a really sort of unnerving decision for a lot of my friends in Omnis, because we'd grown up dreaming of films, making them our whole lives as kids and whatnot. But it always seemed like this legitimate thing that was maybe in the future and accessible through some sort of legitimized construct, a studio or whatever, and unions and such. But to actually skirt around that and say, well, no one's ever going to give us this money, and we're just going to have to make these movies anyway. That's one of the harder decisions, and I think it's appropriate to show this clip so you could see that I'm not in the interest of making like these mumblecore movies, which have to be made for a little money. I mean, that's just what they are. Production value is something that is very much on my mind, and I'm always trying to make a film, look as best as I can possibly make it. And we never have nearly enough money to do so. So I'd like to be here to speak to these things of how to make these films, which are basically made of crimes, and I'm not joking when I say that. And just fight for seeing an ambitious vision come to the fore, and really, especially when it comes to other things that we might touch on too, like making palatable formula-tized films that everyone knows and loves, which can do very well for a person's career, or kind of doing something that you've never seen before and dealing with the fucking shitstorm that comes your way when you do that. It's really not a walk in the park. I really mean it.
But what were some of those crimes for Ham on Ryan? What was it like making? I mean,
one
in that time.
We would close roads down without permits, like things like this. There was a good amount of just like not necessarily a crime, but a lot of coercions in a sense. Like we had the dresses in this scene and all the costumes. Oh, I don't mind the light. We had them donated for charity, and we just shot with them before we gave them to charity. There's a lot of stealing involved in making these films. And another thing is that another crossroads you're going to get to is about paying people, paying crew, paying cast. That's a huge point of contention for people, and it doesn't feel like a crime to not pay someone on Ham on Rye because no one was getting paid, and it's not really a commodity, you know. But that's a real thing you're going to have to look in the eyes when you make films independently, and in this way that I mentioned, which is, you know, let's just do it ourselves. So here to talk about that too.
Also, if anybody has questions, I think we could just like ask them throughout.
Any time, really.
Yeah. But what, like, on that, what was the difference going from Ham on Rye and Happer's Comet, both films, you know, made on a smaller scale, to something like Christmas Eve, made with like professional actors?
So I'd made a short film before this called Wildflies, before Ham on Rye, and it was a pretty substantial short film. It was about, the first cut was like 40 minutes, and it was a big cast and everything. But the difference between going from this short film and a feature was fucking insane. Like, it was exponentially more work, more puzzles to solve, and it's just an insane jump. Has anyone here made a feature? No? Bob? Okay. Then going from Ham on Rye to Christmas Eve in Miller's Point was another, like, it felt like I'd never done this before, actually. Producing that film was insane, and a huge part of that is when you have more money, everyone on set feels that. Everyone on set feels the pressure of that. And when you have celebrities coming, everyone feels that too. And it's just, the pressure is enormous. Like, it's a lot more. So it was like, I mean, obviously, it's you know, I feel like I was ready to burn my life down to make this film, and it kind of did happen in a sense. Like, my apartment was just obliterated as a production office. And even just like, I'm lucky actually, a lot of the interpersonal things making this film were all very smooth. You know, no bullshit amongst people being upset and whatnot, which happens very often. But it's the pressure is much bigger when you have an actual sort of budget. And I've yet to make a film with a union crew, and I imagine that's even a step further into like everyone feels it, you know. It's kind of like a spectrum, like you the legitimate way versus like we're all just friends having a good time. You know, there's obviously pros and cons to either of those ways. And I actually had just read the book Cassavetes on Cassavetes. Has everyone read this book? It's essential reading for independent cinema. It really is. And it's crazy how he just like refused to pay anyone on his films for his whole career. Like, it's fucking nuts.
He still mortgaged his house.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what are the ways in which you may have to compensate for that in terms of just how you organize it, how you make the production feel like a family?
Mm-hmm. Okay, if you don't have the money to pay your cast and crew, and you have to keep in mind that you pay one, you kind of got to pay them all, with exceptions. Sound, gaffer. You know, the sound is the one thing you basically always have to pay for. Also, going on Cassavetes, he would have anyone around him do the sound, and he would have a year of shit sound footage. Like, he would just literally have nothing to use. Sound is, you have to pay for sound. You really do. Not even competent sound. You need very good sound. You know, there's a threshold, and if you don't meet it, then your film just is going to suffer immensely, and it'll all be a huge waste. And then I think that if you're going to hire a lighting team, like, yeah, they got to get paid too, because it's so laborious. But I think on Ham on Rye, this was the case. I think everyone's generally okay with that, and part of it is, okay, when you make a no-budget film, there's no favors. No one's doing you a favor, and we're all here because we all want to see this film get made. And going on Cassavetes again, I'll probably mention a lot because I just read this book. But he if someone asked him for a contract, he would just fire them. you just thought like you're here for the wrong reasons. And I think that there's two things that you have to keep in mind. For one, if you're making a film and no one's getting paid, you're not getting paid, obviously. The other thing is you need to really treat them with respect. And a big part of that is you have to be 1,000,000% clear of the expectations of making a film. You know, like, you'll be like, okay, so we're going to be on set for about 2 weeks or whatever your set will be, and it'll be like 8 to 10 hours. We might go into 12, and they might be like, that's cool. And you're going to say, no, but we're going to be on set. It's going to be really hard. It's going to be really crazy. And they're like, no, it's okay. And you have to say, no, I want to really, I really want to make it clear to you. This is going to be very challenging, and this is what you're expected to do, and this is, you know, you need people who are crystal clear on what's going on, because the worst form of disrespect that a producer could have is keeping people in the dark about their workload and what's expected of them. Another thing is you find people who are like you, trying to learn skills. It's very valuable for a set like this for everyone to come together and have a very formative experience that could lead to, and has empirically, many more jobs. You know, so you're hiring people who are not specialized, who don't have, except for sound, who don't have all the skills. So that's obviously that's a weakness of your set, is that you're not working with people who are amazing at their job. But the strength is that you're all in it for a mutual benefit, you know, and hopefully that benefit is the film. You know, that you all believe in this thing truly. And another thing I want to say is. You are going to find that if you don't pay people, they have their lives, and you have to respect that. You know, like, that's why I like to have a long prep period. Like, for Ham on Ride, the full context you should receive is the cast has over 100 people, and there's 60 locations. We shot it in like 15 days. And it was a very smooth shoot, and it was a very meticulously planned ordeal. Everything was planned over 8 months of prep. So that allowed me to have people getting costumes, doing locations, whatever you need to do, along such a long period of time that they could actually live their lives, and it wasn't like I was taking them away from the ability to make money and survive, you know? Another little tidbit from Ham on Rye, and the next film we made was Topology of Sirens, which is the same budget, the same shooting schedule and everything. When we have actors who need to take 2 or 3 weeks off of work, it becomes a lot harder not to pay them, honestly. I mean, then it becomes a truly privileged art form. But with Ham on Rye, like, most people could afford a day or 2, you know, per week to give to you, and that's how we got the cast. Really, it's just a lot of people devoting only a few days at a time. So it actually made it a lot easier as an ask to make a no-budget film.
I have a question. I know there's probably like a million billion ways to do this, but like when you're making a no-budget film and like you yourself aren't getting paid, like what are some of the ways that you or like people you know have kind of like juggled and supported yourself while also like taking on like insane project?
Yeah. That's another thing I probably should have mentioned first, that like the first thing that you're going to have to wrestle with after graduating college is like what you're going to do for money. And you're going to wrestle that a long time if you make art films. But I actually watched a lot of people in my class at Emerson take jobs that were really appealing, because it's like, oh, I'm working at Netflix. Oh, I'm working with these people who are making these huge movies. Oh, I'm working with these agencies, and, you know, this famous actor was in the lobby and I met them, you know. These things become very appealing, especially when it's like my parents, they know Hulu. They're happy I work for Hulu. And you can make money, and, you know, actually our AC on this film and on all of our films, who's actually co-wrote EFIS, he works for Hulu, and we were able to do this all and whatnot. But what I often find is that you really will become the work that you do. You know, like, it will really impact the way you think, even creatively, and the way you think of the world. So especially these Hollywood agencies, they're extremely corrosive to a creative mind, I think. And like, I interned as a a script reader for Thunder Road who made like Gods of Egypt and these big studio things. And just hearing some of the things they said was like, oh, I'm just so not on the same page as these people. You know, like they were saying like, oh yeah, that writer was too precious. They had too many thoughts about their script. It's like, that's the point of life, to be precious about it. So I think it is really important what you do for money. For me, for the first maybe 3 years after graduation, I worked as a barista. And then for many years after that, I worked as like somewhat of like a tutor for autistic children, and then like children with anxiety and depression. And it became like this really weird specialty that I got that allowed me to make a lot of money actually in very little time each week. Like I was working like 10-hour weeks, and able to support myself. Because I also like, another thing is when you go into this real world, the level of luxury that you may or may not desire or be accustomed to will actually dictate your career and types of movies you make and types of movies you can make. So I try to keep as low of an overhead as I can, and I've always sort of been this way. And at some point, I was hired like $25,000 to write a script for these people who wanted to write like a kids show. And I did that. This made me survive a long time. And now with these projects, I've taken little bits of salaries and little lily pads, come up, which is good. But at first, there's just so many things you could do for money. I know it's tough. It's just most of them are really shitty, right? The world.
Like, I don't really know how to answer this or ask this question because I feel like it's a lot of different components. But like, for even like teaching yourself all the different parts of the pre-production pipeline, like where do you start? What problems are you thinking about tackling first? And is it different from film to film?
Yeah. Producing is, well, I think, is everyone here film director track or no? Mostly, can I actually see with the hands? Film directors. Okay, film writers, not directors. Film producers. I guess what else? Film lovers? Critics, theorists. Well, I had no experience producing before, save for the kids show I did, which was like truly a no-budget venture, and then I made the short film. But it really is a very intuitive job, and the way that I first tackled the job of producing these sort of grand films is, well, for one, I think having like a sort of paranoid mind is really good for producing, oddly, because you're always thinking of what could go wrong, and that's what is going to make it not happen, you know. But it's kind of like, okay, picture a shot. Picture these shots we just saw. What are all the things that I need? Start there on the screen. What are all the things I need to make that happen? Okay, these costumes, this location, these people, the makeup that they may or may not have on, and props, and then you think about the sort of apparatus that surrounds this frame. You know, okay, we need this crew people, and we need bathrooms. You know, we need to know where the nearest hospital is. We need to know how long it's going to take from get to location A to B. It's just a really, like, you have to just sit down almost like a writer and just imagine each day, and take a step through it. And when you get to talk it out with a production team, it becomes very illuminating of all the things that could go wrong. You know, like a good producer would be like, oh no, that's actually, you know, Cinco de Mayo, the traffic's going to kill us on the way from A to B. You know, you're thinking that way. And another thing I want to say as a producer, I really stress having backups of everything. You know, understudies for every actor, every location, because when you're not paying for these things, they go quick. You know, like really, someone's like, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, a location. And you're like, well, we've been shooting there for 2 days, and we have 4 more days. What do you mean? So having backups is a big, it saves you.
reverse engineering basically from like
Yeah.
the script and
Yeah.
concept.
Just reverse engineering with a team and a paranoid sort of dialogue about,
Yeah.
about you know what a big concern is on a set is mutiny. You know, like I've been, having a good time and yeah, it gets hairy sometimes. It's true. Those late days and those days where you're behind schedule. That's really dispiriting for people. But just imagining what might lead to mutiny. Like on Christmas film, one thing that we didn't take for account is like, okay, we have enough holding in this house, which is, for those of you who haven't seen the film, it's a house of like 30 actors and then 30-something crew or whatever it was in this one house. And our holding area was the fucking garage, and we realized it was freezing in there. So it's kind of like you're in hospitality, honestly, when you produce a film. Like, you need to think about the well-being of these people. And for Ethos, for example, it really was like hospitality. We had like wine and chocolates on everyone's pillows when they arrived, just so everyone comes to a good vibe, and like that makes a difference. So you get to a set and you're like, no one's here to pick me up. This is my sleeping quarters. You put these ominous, what would you call it? like foreboding things about walking onto a set, and it really takes the faith away from the crew in the production and in the production's ability to care for it.
Similarly, but going back a bit to you at Emerson, which is where you met the Omnis co-founders. What was unique about that experience, and what do you feel like you guys harnessed there, and what was the bond that you created there?
So, of all the people in Omnis, I knew of all of them in college. We were friends, but I was really only friends, like truly, with Lorena. And she wasn't making films then, and I wasn't making films then. But we all, what actually was the commonality between us was not film, it was music. We all were making music. We were all in bands. Actually, sorry, and John, of course. John was one of my best friends in college as well. And I think that, I don't know, our culture is so specific. You find people who have an appreciation for ambient drone or harsh noise music. Like, you're gonna have a bond. There's gonna be something that's like, all right, yeah. Okay. And those are the people who, we helped each other grow creatively. I don't know. I think it's having a shared value about art, and by meeting people who happen to have these same sensibilities. That was probably, and keep in mind, at Emerson, probably like any film school, the majority of the people there didn't like the movies that we liked. In my view, the most Emersonian movies are like Peanut Butter Falcon. I didn't mean that as such a thing. But it really is. And like Everything All at Once, which is, that's those movies do very well, But unlike some of the friends who I've met who have gone to film school, that's art film school, like Cal Arts, like watching Bellatar was like an odd thing to do. Yeah.
Well, yeah, maybe same here.
Oh, really? Is that right?
I think, here I think Everything Everywhere All at Once is kind of the benchmark.
Okay.
But that's a generalization. I was a very big
But then, but that's fine, and we meet each other, if that's not our favorite movie, we can find each other more easily. That's another thing. Like, for me, I was able to really get into very exciting places early on, outside of college, as I alluded to before, with like this kids track, because I had the weirdest ambition. You tell people you want to like write kids television, they're gonna be like, oh, meet this person. Oh, meet, like you say you want to make Everything All at Once, they're gonna be like, oh, I don't know what to tell you. Having a niche interest actually is, it can really take you places, I find.
With music, do you feel like there's a continuity from the music that you made to the films that you make now? Or?
I don't know, not aesthetically, but like one of my favorite things about studying in Boston and making music, John Davies and I had a drone band, and we got on like really amazing bills somehow as two college students just emailing, show bookers. But just being in these environments at these shows where you just sit for like an hour and you're experiencing this thing, but you're also in your own space, That's kind of the way that I see filmmaking. I really enjoy movies to be. I actually have grown to very much hate the word vibes, but it's just this feeling that you're just kind of. It operates like music in a way.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned earlier was the graduating and having that crossroad of, oh, do I make this thing with no money, or do I have this imaginary like real version with money? For you, like for Ham on Ryan or your other projects, what was that kind of moment for you where you decided to just make it, and what was it like for your other filmmaker friends?
Well, keep in mind, most people are never going to get it handed to them. Most people, a vast majority, but some of them will become like Ari Aster. Some people their first film, they just come out with a $7 million, genre film that they have this way and this serendipity, and boom, it's a very rare exception, but it does happen. The rest of the people, I think you're gonna wait forever, and for me, I remember. So Ham on Rye actually, it began as a short film. I made my first short film. I approached Carson and I said, we should work together. We should do this film. And it was a short, and then I remember I met a filmmaker, and I won't say who it is, but I really didn't like their film. But I was at the point in time in my life where I was just taking meetings with everyone I could to learn, and that's a really great thing to do. Really, just like even if you don't like their films, whatever. We're both working in this medium, and it's not like I have moral reservations about them, which would be different. But they were like, listen, these film festivals get fucking 1 million shorts, and they get only a percentage of features. Just make a feature, now's the time. And when they told me that, I was like, whoa, okay. And they were like, just ask your parents for $100,000 to make what? But anyway, barring that last piece of advice, I was like, okay, I'll make this film. And I don't know, it was just, once I was able to see it as a feature, it became an infectious sort of energy. And when I told my friends, like, oh, it's a feature now, they were like terrified. They're like, what? So, but I think that you asked about other people I've seen. I say, and I have a lot of people in my network of filmmakers now, but this was really the first of a ton of films to be made, this Ham on Rye film. Like, I watched so many films being made in its wake of friends of mine and friends of friends, and at one point, someone told me, a programmer at Locarno, was like, Tyler, everyone you touch makes a film. I was like, okay. And I guess it's true. And it's not just me, but a lot of my friends, we've managed to really empower each other through just being there to say, like, yeah, that's a really amazing idea. I'll help you do that, yeah. So.
How else do you support them, like as a producer or just as a film?
It's changed over time. Like, I was on set, and I was cleaning shit out of a toilet, and I was like, I'm not doing this again. This is not, like, it was not my film, And I just thought, like, there's other ways to help produce people's films. And at this point, my involvement in other films is, a big part of producing a film is kind of coming up with a philosophy about, well, how is this going to actually happen? How is this going to get made? So I really do get a joy out of, like, architecting film shoots, and also, like, I'm there on the calls with the financiers, and I'm very happy to, like, try to reach for talent and things like this, and just put it all together at, like, a big like macro scale, and then the set could be whatever. Like, I take a step back for this moment. But initially, for Ham on Rye and for Topology and possibly other films too, it was like we had like a production team. It was like 7 of us maybe, and it was really, and 7 of us, which are basically Omnis Films. And the idea was, we can't hire a costumer, we can't hire a locations person, we can't hire these people, but we can kind of get people to take those positions part-time, take the titles, and we can, what's the word I'm looking for? Mitigate their labor. You know, we can supplement their workload as a producing team. So it became like this nebulous multi-hat wearing, like, okay, Eric, my co-writer, you're going to be finding locations, you're going to be helping people find all the props because they have too much work that they could feasibly do.
So what was the exact budget of Ham on Rye?
Yeah, it was like $25,000, something like that.
Can you talk about wiring?
Oh, wiring, yes, of course. And I've outlined this online. But I think it was, I paid $10,000, my writing partners paid 5 each, so that's 20, and we did a Kickstarter that raised $3,000, horrendous failure of a Kickstarter. We got, I think a friend of mine from college gave me $1,000, and lastly we had a $1,000 credit card bonus. That's the budget. Something like that.
This is change of subject. What's your writing process? Like, how do you write every day? Do you write at a certain time of day? Do you have to be in a certain mood?
Definitely like a binge writer type where Eric Berger and I, we think of a film and we once we're ready to jump, we just dive into it. And so coincidentally, I'm writing for the first time in probably a few years now, 5 years. Whoa, is that right? Wow, that's fucking crazy. But we're writing a new film, and we started in January. And I was just telling Josh we finished our first script, the first draft, only a few days ago. Yeah.
You spoke about how film to you is in some ways like music because it flows, and you said you didn't want to use the word vibe. How do you then navigate structure vis-a-vis that flow?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So the way I picture it is like it's kind of like, I picture it like, okay, so a lot of these films that we've been making, like, in a sense, you could say nothing happens, but there has got to be some sort of carrot that the audience is following, and even if it ends up being just a pretense to show a film. So for Ham on Rye, for example, it's the interest is we're drawn with our curiosity in these incremental ways that we're exposing new information to build at something, and then the sort of collapse of that is the appeal for someone like me, not a lot of other people. But I don't know. It's a good question. It's somewhat of a. I think that in every art medium, composition is just a requirement. You know, like you need to have a compositional sense. You know, you need to say, well, this next to that, oh, that feels right. Oh, I like that. Oh, that feels good. So it's less of a science, and some people do make it into a science of like, when are you going to be giving the next gratification of a plot point every 3 pages or whatever. But for me, it's more about it feels right.
Okay, when it comes to like, I guess, selling these movies, whether to financiers or like distributors, and you have a very sort of vignette-y, airy type movie, how do you like bundle that up and like quantify it to them and describe, like, because it's just hard. I think like if you're not writing like a logline movie, right? Like how do you tell people about it?
Well, what's funny is for a lot of the films that we've made, we could have ways to put them into a logline that's kind of an appealing one, but it's kind of a lie, like it's, and I think that audiences are really, really caught on to this in a bad way, like people are like, that wasn't what I thought it was going to be, what the fuck? But, it's another skill. You need so many weird skills as a filmmaker, and one of them is actually just like salesperson. You need to be able to just, you know, excite someone about your idea. For Ham on Rye, you know, it has a high concept enough for it to be, you could say it in a palatable way. Oh yeah, they go to this dance and it decides the rest of their lives, or something like that. But also, I think that there's more to this question, because one thing that you should all realize when you're looking for money is that people aren't actually investing in ideas, and if they are, it's kind of scary, because they might want to be part of it, like creatively, which you really should know, and actually contractually know, really. But what they're actually doing is they're investing in you, and I really mean that. They think you are awesome. They think you have something special, and they might even, and people with money, the way they look at investments is not like, this film's going to make me $1 million, but maybe in 2 or 3 films it'll become bigger. So they really are investing in you. So I think that in my experience, what's helped me, and for Ham on Rye, we didn't really raise money by knocking on people's doors. That didn't really happen until later. But it's just being passionate about what you're doing. It's an insane weapon, actually.
And do you think that passion is what sells these concepts more than just, you know, a log line?
Well, think about it this way. The passion that I have for my film was somehow shared with my best friends, and they knew it, they understood it, without me having to even explain it to them. That was allowing us to make this film. Then the film itself, we had to do the whole fucking rigmarole, and I'll definitely be happy to get into festivals and how to navigate that whole thing. But then once we got into Locarno, once we got our positive reviews and our distribution, now suddenly I have a lot less work to do in like having to explain myself. Like, I have a film, and if you like it, you like it, and if you don't, you don't, you know? Yeah.
Well, can you go into the festival process and how that's changed now, going from Ham on Rye to Christmas Eve?
It's brutal. Festivals are really, it's a really numbers game, and it is also a club, unfortunately. Not entirely, but mostly. And maybe that's not the best way to put it, even a little cynical. I think that one thing about festivals is there's so much human psychology that is part of the whole process, and I think you need to think of it this way. Programmers, who I have grown to have so much respect for, they're fucking film workers, they're soldiers of cinema. They watch so many films, most of them are so bad. Most of them are so bad, dispiriting, make you not lose your magic kind of thing. So when they get an email from their friend and there's like, oh, I like this movie, they're going to be like, well, let's do that one then, because that's psychologically so much more appealing. And it's also just like when we watch movies with stars, where like it's easier because we have to do less work. We're sort of coddled by the familiarity. It's the same with these festivals. So you have to realize that. You have to realize that at the festivals, if you can have someone speak on your behalf, and one thing we did with Ham on Rye actually was Carson, he is a film critic, and he has a lot of connections in the film critic world. This was really, really instrumental for that film to take off the way it did. One of the connections worked at Filmmaker magazine, so we had an article in Filmmaker before we premiered. That's a great thing to put in an email to a programmer, and it also means people in the industry already know about it, because oddly a lot of people read these magazines every day in the industry. Another thing was we had people through Carson's network, who became my friends as well, who wanted to help us out. So after getting rejected from festivals for like 6 months for Ham on Rye, it's really, really demoralizing. It's, including Locarno rejected us, where we eventually played a year after. What ended up happening was we showed the film to a filmmaker. I won't say any names, but he's become very successful very recently. And he was like, "Oh, I like this film. I'm going to send it to Santa Barbara Film Festival," and that's how we got our world premiere. That's the game.
I have another question kind of similar to Jake's, which is that I know I've had conversations with friends where we've talked about our frustrations with like making films without having it fit into a certain box, and the desire to make something that fits in a box so that it's more likely to, say, get accepted into a festival, or more likely to get made, to, you know, get a grant or something. And so I'm wondering, how do you navigate that just at the purely creative level?
Well,
has that been an issue for you?
Yeah, well, at the creative level, I mean, you have to go on your impulses. I mean, you have to make the film that only you can make. So it's not going to matter this box or not. You know, like one place where it really does matter is the endings that you make for your films. You know, are they going to be resolved? You know, that's a very satisfying thing. It does really well for audiences. Or are they going to be like, I like my films to haunt you at the end by like this sort of lack of resolve. And so the thing about the whole box situation, making a formulaic sort of art house realism film or whatever it's going to be, whatever is popular at the time, there's two thresholds to pass. The first one is the gatekeepers of the industry, which would be like the programmers and let's just start with the festival circuit. When you make a film that's out of the box, it's going to actually float to the top easier because of all the shit that we talked about before. And it's, you know, and it's going to get around if it's any good. I mean, if you make a film that's good, it's going to get around. Have faith in that. Really, it's true. Because it's hard, it's rare. But anyway, the point is, that's the first threshold. The second one's the audience. And selling the film. That's where you're going to have a lot more trouble. Audiences are not happy with films that are unconventional. I mean, as John Cage, who said that they can only withstand like 10% of novelty, and anything past that gets set on my face. So it's, and I think that the films that I've made and that my friends have made are really good examples. At least maybe our newer films are a little more palatable. I actually don't even know. But we're able to really put our stake in the ground in an industrial way, while having like a weird relationship with audiences, like mass audiences, rather.
I think maybe now we could show another clip from Happer's Comet, your second film, which, from what I understand, was a much smaller production, maybe more loose structurally. But do you want to give context for how it was made?
Sure. I was turning 30 years old and quarantined for COVID, and Ham on Rye was just about to come out, in virtual theaters as that time. And I was making this film at home. I was living with my parents during the quarantine for the first time in since I was 18 years old, so it was a real trip, all these things coming together. And I went back home to make this film, which we shot it. The crew was 2 people. The budget was $3,000. It was one of the most satisfying creative experiences I've ever had. So I'm happy to show the clip and talk about it.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Sorry that we couldn't hear that with the sound louder, because I think Happer's Comet, especially the sound, plays as important a role as the images. Can you talk about that a bit, and just like maybe making this film where things were sort of pared down before, so.
Yeah, we didn't actually have a sound person on set for that movie, which made it really easy to make. But I think that the one thing that I like to talk about with this film is that the pandemic allowed me to do something which I think most people would concerning themselves with their film careers would never really feel comfortable doing, which is make a no budget, a smaller film than the previous one. And this was an extremely liberating thing for me, and it really made me, remember what's important. I mean, I remember one night I went to an Apichatpong, giving you money, or actors reading your script. That's a whole nother fucking thing. You want to put yourself in the best position to have these resources come to you, but it it can actually muddy what's important, which is art and cinema. You know, this is why we're here. So it was an amazing thing to make this film, and I know that no matter what, I can always make a film like this, as long as I have $3,000 to do it.
Sorry, I'm gonna look.
I think we have a question.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back to, on that note, what you were saying earlier about the work you were doing to support yourself post-grad. And I think that's super refreshing to hear as people in film school, because there's this overwhelming narrative of like, if you don't take that job at that agency or that studio, that
People are telling you that?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
it's
no.
like, there's this fear of like, if you do the thing that's not film related, it's like has some bearing over your success, but I think it's really like freeing to hear that that work can influence your creativity. So I was wondering if you could speak more about how that influenced your process and the things you were interested in creatively and taking that path.
How the work I did influenced me?
Yeah, like what the jobs you were doing to support yourself and how that.
Well, I think that if anyone ever gets to work at a restaurant, you know, it actually is an amazing experience in a way. It's a really sort of depleting job, and it's also somewhat demeaning as well. But you meet so many people, and if there's one thing that I could tell you about the films I make is that they come from a love of people. And we live in such a world where it's so hard to meet people who are not in your demographic. I mean, we've really been carved up as into consumer groups. So when I worked at this restaurant, I just met so many people I loved, that I thought were amazing, and just totally, you know, it kept me very fresh in this sort of chaos. And also there were so many people. And in fact, I was at a barista at a conjunction between two restaurants. So I met a ton of people, and perhaps I never thought about it. It informed my sort of approach of just seeing faces everywhere, maximalistic. What's going on there? It's, you know, it's interesting.
This is a bit of a tangential question, but in between like graduating and like doing your first feature, I know you said that you were working on a short, but were there other things that you were like working on or involved in, or like even doing for yourself to fulfill yourself creatively?
Well, I come from music, so I was making music a long time, up until about my first feature, more or less. But you know, maybe one thing people don't share is that you make a lot of shit that you just don't share with anybody, and hopefully it's not stuff you paid a lot of money for. So there was a few short things that I did that just never were even finished, which is such a bad habit to not finish things. But there is a good level of you got to just work and get things out of your system, and you know, finding your voice is a really, really challenging thing. I find that it's kind of a meandering and very. It's not an easy journey to find the voice, like because the biggest advice is make the film that only you can make, but it takes a little bit to learn what that even is, what that even means, what do you even care about, or versus what, you know, like. Your form, does it come from these things that inspire you? And that might be fine, but what's your form? You know, and I could speak to that only in that I spoke with this woman one day. She was like a meditation person, and I asked her a question about how do I tell the difference between fear and like just my true discernment of something. You know, how do I know this fear isn't just taking over my view of something? And they said, well, you won't know. But in a few years, look back and you're going to realize there's like a compounding of experience that will show you the apparatus at work.
Was it like painful for you though in that time to have this desire to make things but know that you didn't have your voice yet?
You know, I was oddly very gentle with myself in those days. You know, I wouldn't even beat myself up over it. I just, because you know, I felt I didn't study film. You know, I wasn't making films. I wasn't, you know, I wasn't surrounded by people who were making films and getting them out there. So I was really able to just be in the shadows, and you know, my mistakes mattered to nobody, and they didn't really even matter to me so much somehow. I think it's important, really.
This movie,
you embrace so many limitations, which is something I love about your films. And do you feel like limitations, how do they allow you to do more, be more generous while making a film? Do they help you do that, or are the limitations something you fight against constantly? Because for this, you only had one light, right? You just used one primary light to...
No, we had one primary light. Yes, it was the Joker bug and that beautiful light that we were really inspired by Nuit by Chantal Ackerman, of this kind of like hard light source kind of approach, and we had LED tubes, and I think on occasion we would bust out the RE kind of small kit. I mean, I learned how to put up lights. Like, it was just like I had to do the work. But I don't love limitations. It's not like my happy place, But one thing I think that you all should be very aware of is that you will be faced with limitations in terms of people that you work with, like the actors. And I think that one of the skills that you are sort of called to have is bringing out the best performance in anyone you work with. And that's very hard, and the biggest mistake that you can make, that people make all the time, and to me it's almost like punishable by death, is like making someone do a role that doesn't befit their essence and their humanity, and I find it very obviously dehumanizing, and really you have these ideas of your script and whatnot, but you're going to have the resources in front of you that you actually can manage, and you have to find a way to translate the emotion of what this felt like with what is there before you. You can't force that translation. You can't make someone say dialogue that doesn't fit their essence, or be in situations and whatnot. So I think you're really called to find the beauty in everybody, really, and know how to really exploit that beauty for the best film and best scenes and everything, emotions and things like that.
For you, does that mean that when you're, say, writing a script, you are thinking of a specific person's essence in mind, or are you then reshaping that afterwards?
Sometimes, but I really do think a film is a series of translations. You have the idea, and sometimes it's based off a person or just a feeling you kind of get, like, oh yeah, that's what they feel like. Then you meet the people, and the literal translation will never work. And then you shoot it, and then the same deal. You're not going to just, you could just give a film to an editor and not even be there if it's a literal translation of the script. It's ridiculous to think that. So it's just capturing the feeling.
How much do you go into character with your actors?
Not at all. No, it's funny. For Christmas Eve in Miller's Point, we have a really large ensemble, but we got really deep in the weeds on the psychology of all these people. We know everything about their lives in a sense, but we didn't tell the actors any of it. And I don't think we needed to. I think there's something about, going back to Cassavetes, he really enjoyed his actors to be as clueless as to what was going on as possible. So that they can be vulnerable and just not, have that tenderness just ready to see. And for him and I, we didn't even show the script to anyone except for their own scene pages, so they didn't even know what they were doing. They had no idea. It was just a blind trust. So,
what about working with non-professional actors? I'm guessing because for Happer's Comet, shot in your own community, I'm guessing there's people you knew, people of people you knew, other people. How do you work to get that essence, that emotional vulnerability out of people who are in a way playing themselves or playing don't have the professional toolkit?
Yeah, there's going to be a degree of skills that you have that will just be unconscious to you, and this might be one of them for me, where I don't actually have a method that I do to make sure everyone's going to show up and do their best work. I think that taking them seriously is one thing, and taking it seriously, but another thing is sometimes you have to be like the film, be what the scene is, kind of I don't know, I find if I want to get a performance out of someone, I could kind of try to intimidate them, scare them if I can, if that's what's going on. I was shouting at the kids all, just scaring them.
Guess what?
Things like this. But actor, non-actor. Sometimes I don't even really know what acting is. I mean, you have these things you love about people. This is just I know this is not everyone's methodology, but I have these things that I really love about these people, whether they're, famous or not. And most of the time I just find a context for that to shine, So the acting is not, I don't even know what that is at that point. Doing the dialogue, the blocking, okay, sure.
Well, shifting gears, I guess, this is a question that I asked you last year, but I think it might lend itself to ask it again for this crowd, which is like, what do you think is something that is missing in contemporary film, especially in independent film? And actually, the flip side of that too, what do you think is overdone the most?
I really feel like people take this medium for granted. It's kind of just like, oh yeah, movies. But like, what the medium does on a good day for me is it reminds you that you're seeing, that you're here, that we're experiencing life. So to me, I think cinema is one of the biggest gratitude mediums, and I think that the people who pioneered this medium all that time ago, they were alive with the gratitude of this. They were amazed by what this thing can do and the power that it held. I mean, they were pioneers of light in a way, the way that humans have harnessed light to become this holy entity. We take life for granted nowadays. It doesn't mean anything to us. So I think that's what's missing the most, is that there's a lack of like sanctity in image making. And what's overdone, I don't know, handheld, stupid.
You've talked before about like wanting to, I guess, shift away from realism, or from that, I guess, kind of mumblecore style of independent filmmaking. I mean, I think it's a matter of like things becoming standardized. It's like maybe at a certain point that was necessary and that felt new, but then it evolves and it becomes convention, I guess. I mean, I think Omnis is maybe similar to like modernism in that sense, and that it's like, at least with modernist authors, they were sort of moving away from realism to focus more on these fine details of life and trying to find the poetry in that.
Yeah, I don't know, the realism as a concept in film, I don't really understand. I mean, it makes sense for like Frederick Wiseman, like this is like you're capturing things that are almost like for posterity in a very sober way. But even neorealism was impressionistic. Realism doesn't exist. For me, my memories are not. What's the realism of memory? It's a ridiculous thing. Memories are warped by our sort of imperfect conscious, and that's real to me. I think a few more things I want to say. Just really, like, you learn a lot of things the hard way, and I really wish people were there to tell me. I mean, I've had a lot of helpful people on my path, but one thing I want to say is that when you get to the point to make a film and you sell the film, great work. Hire your own PR entity for just you for the release of that film. Unless you have the ability to hire the PR entity through the distributor, which you might not have. That's a lesson I learned the hard way. Yeah.
Can you talk about why that's so important?
Yeah, I mean, when you work with these distributors, one of the things that is a paradigm of this industry is big fish, small pond, or big pond, small fish. You know what I mean? Where like you might actually land A24 or whatever. I mean, this might have been more relevant a few years ago. But you might have a big distributor, and when your film gets in there, you're like, yay, I'm with this distributor, or here I am at Toronto Film Festival or whatever. This is great. But that sometimes is really bad for your film, because the way these things work is that they're going to have the people who come up on top of this distribution slates per year, or of these film festivals, and the rest kind of gets, left to the wayside. This is very common. So sometimes smaller distributors will do more for your film, smaller festivals. You never really know. But I think you have to go with the passion, And in the case of PR, PR is fucking enormous. It's there's only a few of them that I would actually even trust, and that's a whole other thing of how to gauge those who to work with. But yeah, PR is very important. It's highly important.
Are you optimistic for the future of indie filmmaking?
It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, maybe, because we're seeing a real collapse at the studio level, and now A24 and Neon are like these mid-tier becoming upper mid-tier in terms of scale studios. So maybe the industry is just working itself out for the new finances of today with the streaming model. I don't know. I think that what's really important is that we keep people who might not have the theatrical experience in their lives, all across this country and in other countries, to be exposing themselves to great films. I really fear that that's going to become more marginalized to just, certain niche people. But, when I meet people, classrooms of people who are interested in movies, yeah, it'll keep going. I think, I don't know, it's tough, man, it's tough. A lot of the interesting independent cinema in the 90s, I feel like we didn't even really know about until decades later, other than, of course, the famous people. So it's hard to say.
I think we are running short on time,
Yeah.
but does anybody have any final questions?
I just have a question about your relationship with your work as time has gone on. You've been making things for a while now. Are there films that you look back on that you regret, or that have brought you more pride than when you first made them? I think that is something that a lot of artists struggle with, is looking back on things that maybe don't feel like them. Or and you were talking about finding your voice. Are there experiences there that you've had that have been frustrating or rewarding?
Well, I don't watch the films, and I will someday. This was weird to watch this clip, but I was thinking we'll make a celluloid version of this film, and I would love to see it in a theater one day. But I think there's some filmmakers who would invite you to their house to watch their movie, and they're gonna be watching it with you, and they've seen it a million times. I'm not that kind of filmmaker. To me, the creativity and creation is a very pure process, but the act of sharing the films and getting them appraised en masse and whatnot is very impure. So it's not something I think about too much. I'm proud of the work I've done. I don't think I've ever missed the mark of my own vision. What you see is what it was supposed to be. So.
Any other?
Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Where's your book? Are you still making the book?
I wrote a book that's 200 pages filled with all these tips and things. It's not published yet, but soon. Thanks so much.